everyone, welcome to my debut episode of Memes from My Youth, where I talk about memes from back in my time, and sometimes I talk about memes from before they were even called that. And sometimes I talk about memes when they finally had a name for it. But in today's pilot episode 0 intro, I'm going to talk about memes before they were even called that. But in today's episode, it's not a specific topic. Instead, today's episode is a mixed bag of different things from my youth. When I was a kid in the late 1990s/early 2000s, the internet was in its infancy. Back then, there was no Wikipedia, there was no YouTube, there was no Spotify, no Crunchyroll, no Netflix or anything like that. Back then, if you wanted to watch your favorite show, then you had to watch it on TV. And back then, I was someone that used to be a couch potato. I loved to watch TV back then, and especially cartoons. And back in those days, in an era with no streaming services, you couldn't watch an episode of the Powerpuff Girls whenever you felt like it. If you wanted to watch the Powerpuff Girls, then you had to tune in on time. Otherwise, you would miss that episode and not know what just happened. But if you did miss it, one solution was to watch that episode on a weekend instead. That way, you could actually keep up with your friends at school if you missed that episode. Now, I watched so many cartoons back then when I was a kid that I lost count. But to sum up the ones that means a lot to me, I remember growing up with shows like Pokemon, Digimon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, The Powerpuff Girls, Cat Dog, Cow and Chicken, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Johnny Bravo, Saban's Oliver Twist and Gulliver, Studio Ghibli's My Neighbor Totoro, and Spirited Away, Disney's Hercules, Disney's Tarzan, Disney's The Lion King, and Disney's The Great Mouse Detective, if I remember that correctly, and Disney's Mulan, and etc. etc. Like I said, there are so many cartoons that it would take an entire episode, the whole episode to sum them all up, but you get the gist of it, yes? But aside from the television, if you were on a computer back then, in my kid years, instead of having YouTube, you had Flash animations and games, and the websites that hosted all of that, and kinda still does that to this day. One relic from the past that still lives on, in the here and now, is the now legendary Newgrounds.com. But unlike YouTube, Newgrounds' primary focus was Flash. And maybe still is, maybe. I don't know, I heard Adobe actually discontinued Flash animation. But, like I said, because Newgrounds was primarily Flash content, unlike YouTube, Newgrounds, sadly, wasn't as outreaching and malleable as YouTube. And the internet was, and still is, a worldwide phenomenon, which means that you are going to have all kinds of people around the world that probably doesn't speak any English, or has English as a first language. And if you grew up in Sweden, then maybe you would instead prefer something more homey, like Hamster Pie, or Hogwatch.nu, or Habbo Hotel. If you are a millennial that was born and raised here in Sweden, like me, then you have likely heard of these OG sites. Also, there were no smartphones and iPhones back then. What we had instead were those very bulgy Nokia mobile cell phones, or maybe mobile, but that's all it was. Just mobile phones with no smart apps and no Wi-Fi. And the sound chip in those cell phones, or mobiles, sucked. It sounded something similar to the soundtrack of Bar Tales 1 on the Apple II, sort of. I think Nokia's sound format was called Mono, I think? But I'm not so sure. And then a few years later, with newer mobile models, the sounds were in MIDI format this time. And those MIDI songs, sounded something out of a Super Nintendo, sort of. If you look up the soundtrack for Super Columbine RPG on YouTube, then you will have a very good grasp to what a MIDI ringtone sounded back then. But anyways, back in those days, I remember mobile ringtone sites having its own mascots, like Crazy Frog, for example. Like, I don't remember what the ringtone site was called back then, but I remember Crazy Frog being something of a representative for ringtones back then, or something like that. I don't know, but please, don't quote me on what Crazy Frog was all about. Even though I was born and raised here in Sweden, not even I myself know what Crazy Frog's main purpose was, or why he was created. As far as I can remember, when I saw Crazy Frog on the internet, it was associated with ringtones back then a lot. And I remember Crazy Frog having its own video racing game on the PC and PlayStation 2. And everything that I talked about thus far, all of this was a time even before any of this was even called a meme. By the way, do my listeners / viewers know what a meme is? To those that don't know, in a nutshell, genes are something that you reproduce to the next generation, so that the next generation are gonna do the same thing when the time is right. But a meme is something you mentally spread around to anybody, like gossip for example, or talking about the news and trends, like a best-selling book like Harry Potter, or a best-selling movie like Star Wars, social media, social ideologies like socialism versus capitalism, gods and different belief systems, culture, clothing trends, societal norms and taboos. All of these things that you mentally pass around are called memes. And that is the difference between a meme and a gene. But memes aren't just a real life thing, you see. It is also applied to the internet. I mean, if you shared a funny picture online, let's say a Pepe meme on Twitter or on Instagram, then congratulations, you just perpetuated what ancient men did thousands of years ago when they started fires with tint and flinder, and then passed that information on to the next generation, whether they were related to that next generation or not. But ever since the internet became more and more accessible to people, people don't think of the real world when they hear the word meme. Nowadays, it is a thing that you see or hear on the internet. I mean, before internet memes, or during the internet's infancy, you had popular songs, TV shows, and movies, and their respected fan bases. Fans and fan bases are memes too, in their own respected right. I mean, heck, the Star Wars and the Star Trek fans have been around even before my time, before they were even called a meme. But I can understand, when you grow up with something, let's say Pokemon, and then, as you get older, the internet comes around as the cool new thing that older adults don't understand, and you and your friends, let's say, talk about Pokemon on image boards, forum sites, MySpace, and whatnot, and to your surprise, Pokemon is a worldwide phenomenon, with millions of fans around the world. You thought this whole time that Pokemon was something that only you and your small group of friends knew about. You didn't think that Pokemon had a worldwide fan base in multiple languages and cultures and skin colors. You didn't think that. And then as you dig deeper, you find out that Pokemon is a Japanese cartoon called anime? What? Anime? What is an anime, you think? And you didn't realize it back then. You thought cartoons were just cartoons, you thought. And then another realization comes to you that at one point in your youth, you watched a movie called My Neighbor Totoro. And that too is called anime. But you didn't know that as a kid growing up in the 1990s, when the internet wasn't as big as it is now. But but I don't blame, my generation of millennials and today's generation of Zoomers for dumping whatever they grow up with onto the internet. Like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or video games like Sonic, or music videos like Eminem's Small Spaghetti. I think I understand. The Simpsons was something that I grew up with as well. Because unlike Cartoon Network and unlike Fox Kids, The Simpsons aired on standard television, so I didn't have to pay for it. And this was a time when my divorced family just couldn't afford to keep, Cartoon Network and Fox Kids anymore. Oh, and by the way, what do you call Fox Kids nowadays? Jetix? Foxbox? Or is it a Disney Channel? Or... But anyways, when that segment of The Simpsons steamed ham came back into people's consciousness and then became a meme, I was all like, yeah, so? I remember that segment of The Simpsons in my pre-adolescent years. I remember that segment very strongly because of how wacky it was, but... What? Why is that a meme now all of a sudden? When that episode aired, years ago. I mean, I did find that segment funny as a preteen back then, but... Why is that a meme now? Why are today's kids memeing over that now all of a sudden? And another thing, though, that I can't figure out is... How do I close off today's episode of Memes from My Youth? Well, I guess I'll just cap this off by saying... Thanks for tuning in, everyone. You will hear from me again either next week or next month. And I hope you enjoyed today's pod vid and my pilot episode, so take care and bye bye for now.